Have you ever thought about what would happen if tips were no longer taxed? Former President Donald Trump recently proposed a plan to exempt tips from federal taxes, a move he announced at a rally in Nevada. This proposal, if implemented, could cost the federal government up to $250 billion over the next decade. But what does this mean for the economy and the average worker?
We're going to begin this hour with a major new campaign promise by former President Donald Trump. He mentioned this just the other day in Nevada. He's calling for an end to federal taxes on tips, something millions of Americans rely on. And now congressional Republicans have introduced bills to turn Trump's rhetoric into actual law.
Could it actually benefit those in the service industry, or will it create more problems than it solves? Trump's proposal has sparked a lot of discussions, especially considering the IRS currently requires all tip earnings to be reported and taxed as regular income. The plan is part of a broader strategy to appeal to workers in the hospitality industry, particularly in battleground states like Nevada. However, critics argue that it may lead to undesirable economic shifts and complicate efforts to manage the federal budget. So, what are the implications of this proposal for workers, employers, and the economy? Let's dive deeper into the details and potential impacts of this significant policy change. Let's dive into Trump's idea to stop taxing tips and what it means for everyone. He made this announcement at a rally in Nevada, aiming to win over workers in the hospitality industry, a big part of the economy in states like Nevada. Right now, the IRS requires that all tips be reported and taxed, just like regular income. Trump's proposal would make tips tax-free. This proposal mainly targets workers in restaurants, bars, and other service jobs who depend on tips as a significant part of their income. The goal is to let these workers keep more of their earnings without increasing their total pay. The Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget, CRFB, estimates that this proposal could cost the federal government between $150 billion to $250 billion over the next decade. This is because the government would lose a lot of tax revenue from these tips. If more income shifts from wages to tips to take advantage of the tax break, the cost could be even higher. The CRFB suggests that this could increase the deficit impact to as much as $500 billion if tipping becomes more common. Right now, workers must report all their tips to their employer, who then includes this income on the worker's W-2 form. These tips are taxed just like regular wages. Employers are required to withhold federal income tax, Social Security, and Medicare taxes on these tips, and pay their share of Social Security and Medicare taxes. One big concern is that if tips become tax-free, employers might lower base wages and rely more on tips to compensate their workers. This could lead to less stable income for workers who depend on tips, which can vary a lot. Critics argue that at a time when the national debt is already high, adding more to it could be problematic. The government already spends a lot on interest payments, and increasing the deficit could make it harder to fund important services. Changing the tax code to make tips tax-free would require approval from Congress. This means it would have to go through a complex legislative process and get enough political support. There may be an opportunity to consider this proposal during the 2025 tax law revisions, when the 2017 tax cuts are set to expire. However, tips were not included in the original legislation, so it's unclear if this idea will gain traction. This proposal is a big change in tax policy with wide-ranging effects. In the next section, we'll look at how this could impact workers, employers, and the overall economy. Now, let's take a closer look at how Trump's proposal to stop taxing tips could affect both workers and employers.
When I get to office, we are going to not charge taxes on tips, people making tips.
This plan might seem like a straightforward way to put more money in workers' pockets, but it has deeper implications that need to be considered. On the surface, making tips tax-free means workers get to keep more of their hard-earned money. For someone making an average of $6,149 in tips annually, this could mean significant savings. However, there's a downside. If employers shift more of their compensation structure towards tips, and reduce base wages, workers might face greater income instability. Tips can vary widely based on customer generosity, economic conditions, and even seasonal changes. This could make it harder for workers to budget and plan their finances. There's a concern that employers might lower the base wages, expecting tips to make up the difference. This could particularly affect workers in states where the tipped minimum wage is lower than the regular minimum wage. For example, in some states, the tipped minimum wage is as low as $2.13 per hour compared to the federal minimum wage of $7.25 per hour. Employers might see an incentive to restructure how they compensate their employees. By shifting more income to tips, they can reduce their payroll expenses. However, this could lead to complications in managing payroll and employee satisfaction. Employers would need to navigate the new tax rules and ensure compliance. This could add complexity to their payroll systems and require updates to how tips are reported and managed. If workers perceive tipped jobs as less stable, it might become harder for employers to attract and retain employees in the service industry. This could lead to higher turnover rates and additional costs associated with hiring and training new staff. The proposal might lead to a broader shift in how income is structured across various industries, particularly in the service sector. This could change the dynamics of the labor market, with more jobs becoming reliant on tips rather than stable wages. If workers start depending more on tips, consumers might feel pressured to tip more generously, potentially altering spending behaviors. This could have a ripple effect on the broader economy, influencing everything from dining habits to service expectations. Trump's proposal to make tips tax-free is certainly generating a lot of buzz. On the surface, it seems like a great way to help out workers who rely on tips, giving them more money in their pockets. But as we've seen, it's not that simple. The idea could end up costing the federal government a huge amount of money, up to $250 billion over the next decade, and maybe even more if tipping becomes more common. This loss in tax revenue could make it harder for the government to fund important services and could add to the national debt, which is already a big problem. We also need to think about how this might change the way people are paid. If tips are tax-free, employers might lower base wages, which could make incomes more unstable for workers who depend on tips. Politicians and experts have mixed feelings about this idea. Some people support it, thinking it could help workers. Others worry about the financial impact and the challenges of getting Congress to approve such a change. Plus, with the 2025 tax law revisions coming up, there's a chance this proposal could be part of a bigger discussion about taxes, but it's not clear if it will make the cut. So, what do you think? Will this proposal help or hurt workers in the long run? How do you feel about the potential impact on the national budget and public services? We'd love to hear your thoughts. If you found this discussion helpful, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. We'll keep you updated on important policy changes and what they mean for you. Stay informed, stay engaged, and let's figure out these big issues together. Hit that subscribe button now and join us on this journey.